welcome everyone. Tonight is our fourth edition of ABODE Academy during this session, and it's on caregiving, managing the family dynamic. And I would have to say that's a huge part of what we do in this world of caregiving and hospice, and of course at ABODE, just dealing with the families, because this journey affects everyone, and so sometimes things don't go as well as we hoped, and so we have a wonderful speaker tonight that's going to kind of talk about that family dynamic. And we've got a small group here tonight, so we aren't going to, we can use the chat box because I'll keep an eye on that, but we'll open for questions and answers at the end of our presentation, unless Byron would like us to just kind of pipe in when we have a question. I'll let him tell you when he comes on. But our speaker tonight, we are so honored to have, and I think you will enjoy him. Tomorrow you will all receive your survey about the program tonight, and please fill that out. And again, as I spoke last week, just any topic you can think of that you would love to have us present, give us those topics, because we're going to start planning our next ABODE Academy, which will come in January. So tonight I would like to present our guest speaker and thank him for joining us and giving us his time tonight. His name is Byron Cordes. He's a licensed clinical social worker, and he's the president, and he's president of Certified Aging Life Care Manager. He's recognized as one of the nation's leading experts in geriatric care management and aging life care. And I believe he's the president of SAGE. That's what I was trying to say. He's the president of SAGE and a certified aging life care manager. He derived from 25 years in the social work field. He's had writings and interviews on geriatrics, families, and caregiving, and he's published nationally. Byron served as the 2012 president of the Aging Life Care Association, formerly the National Association of Professional Geriatric Care Managers, and is a past president for the South Central chapter. He's a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Texas and holds an advanced certification in social work case management from the National Association of Social Workers. And the list goes on, but we're very honored to have him. And so Byron, I'll let you take it from here. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Beverly. Thank you so much. I always hate hearing about myself. I'm like, I don't know who that is. So I also realized it's an old, probably an older bio, because it says 25 years and it's 30 plus now. But Susan, I know I met Susan not quite that long ago, I'm sure. So because we're both in our 30s now. So but thank you guys for asking me to come in and talk about this kind of, I don't know, deeply troubling sometimes topic. And as we talk about family dynamics, I do want to just say right up front that, most of the time, and tonight we'll probably spend more time on talking about family dynamics that don't work or family dynamics that cause problems. But there are many family dynamics that work. So, as we sometimes focus on the negative, I do want to make certain that we acknowledge that there is a positive, that there are many families that even with bumps in the road that still manage to get through what they need to get through. So some families probably work perfectly. I have never seen them. I hate the term dysfunctional family. I don't like it because I don't know what a functional family looks like. Everybody has secrets. Everybody has ghosts in the closet, skeletons in the closet. And everybody has trouble at times communicating with each other. So whether the hiccups are tiny or they're fist fights in the parking lot between family members, everybody has their issues. So I always try to make sure that families understand, we sometimes hold ourselves up to an unrealistic ideal. And I think, social media, certainly current, movies and television, they either show us these, perfect families that are idyllic, which is not normal. I think it's more normal to get families that look more like The Simpsons. I'm, I'm using a cultural reference that I'm not even familiar with. I think I've probably seen one Simpsons episode, but I know that it's a very dysfunctional family. Or Roseanne, right? The old Roseanne show, I think they've rebooted it, kind of a family that has their trials and tribulations, but in the end, they get the work done. They come together. I think, as we talk about family dynamics, we're certainly talking about the ways that we interact with our family, those pieces where we come together. And I forgot, Beverly, I don't mind. I taught college for 10 years. I'm perfectly open to being interrupted. I'm easily distracted, but I will get back on topic. I have just a short outline, so I can get back to it, but I have no problem if somebody has a question, if they just want to pop in. It's a small enough crowd. I can handle it. The ways in which we interact with our family members, are based on our roles and our relationship. And our roles are often assigned to us, right? I'm a son to my parents, right? That was given to me. I don't get to pick I don't get to pick whether I'm a child or not. And so those roles and those relationships, I'm a father to my daughter, I'm a husband to my wife. And with those roles and those relationships come expectations. So, I'm expected to act a certain way towards my parents. And, certainly in Western culture, most cultures, we're expected to, honor our parents, honor our mother and father, right? And so we're supposed to defer to them. And so I can tell you, my mother just left. She came for about 2.5 weeks. She's from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I grew up in Tulsa. And my wife will tell you, my wife and I have been married for 32 years, and my mother comes and I'm a different person because I kind of revert to some of those child roles. I'm different. I have a different relationship with my mother than I do with my wife or my daughter. So, we act a little differently. And I will tell you, my wife doesn't love how my family is the most sarcastic family in the world. We have kind of a dark comedy. And so when I'm around my sisters and my mother, my wife almost can't tolerate me because I just become very, very, even more sarcastic than normal, which is, I'm pretty sarcastic. We revert to those roles and those expectations. I become a father to my daughter. I love it when people say, "Oh, my daughter's my best friend." She might be, but she's still your daughter. And so I hope you have a parent-daughter relationship, right? And so some of those roles and those relationships didn't play out in the best way. I don't want to say healthy way, because they actually may be very healthy. But when we revert to those, sometimes we revert to old patterns that might not be helpful to us in the current situation. So if I have a long-standing argument with and I'll just use my own family. I have one sister who I felt, when my great aunt raised my mother, so she was like a grandmother to us. So basically, when my grandmother figure died, who was an aunt, one sister just kind of came in and kind of took everything, and everything was a memory to her, and so she got very greedy. And so when we dealt with my mother moving out of her house, the funny part was, it was nothing I wanted. That was the funny part. It was nothing that I or my other sister wanted. She was actually very fair about it as we went through, and we'd say, dude, who wants this? I don't want it. Nobody else wants it, then I'll take it. So, she filled 3 carloads while we all kind of took a bucket, of memorabilia. So, but, when we were helping my mother, who's still alive, my mother move out of her home of, 40 years. And she moved in with my younger sister, my older sister, who I felt had that issue. I had all of those emotions kind of come back up. And I just I had to check myself and think, she's being really greedy. She's trying to take everything. She wants the dishes and the china, and she wants the coffee maker. And I bought my mom that coffee maker. I should get it. I don't drink coffee. I don't know, why would I want the coffee maker? I hate coffee. So I had to really check myself and kind of go, wait, it's very different. She's not filling up 3 carloads. She's not taking more than, her fair share. But I had those emotions, and so I had to check them. And so we find some of those old rivalries, and we joke in our practice, kind of joke, the brother who ripped off the Barbie his sister's Barbie's head off the doll. Somehow, 50, 60 years later, that comes up, and they're just fighting like cats and dogs. And in our practice, we're aging life care managers. We kind of help folks through, but occasionally we're court ordered, and we're court ordered in a case where the brother and sister will not speak to each other about their father. And so all communications go through one of our other social workers. So they haven't spoken to each other in years. Everything goes through our social worker, and that is sad. Silly, but mostly sad. So we get those. And so, you guys probably see that in, certainly in the hospice world as we're going through grief. And Edwin, I loved that passage that you wrote, or that you spoke to about grief, and how we tend to not live it to its fullest. And I do think that part of that is we often don't experience real grief until so much later in life. So we don't get a whole lot of experience. We protect our kids from grief. We guard them against it. And so, we really get exposed to grief, many times in our 30s at the earliest. And so we've already formed some bad habits or some different ways that we adjust to things. Anyway, that's just my own thoughts. So, why do people get kind of bent out of shape, or who gets bent out of shape, maybe even better? And obviously, as we talk about family dynamics, when we talk about family, I want to make sure that people can understand that, family can mean a lot of things. And we like a traditional definition in the Western world, right? Family is the nuclear family, a husband and a wife and their children, and then maybe grandchildren, and that's family. But family can be a husband and a wife and a wife, and in my case, where my grandmother didn't raise my mother, my great aunt raised my mother, so we were closer to a great aunt than we were to my mother's actual mother. And it also can include chosen family. So, many people, and actually in some cultures, many times in the Hispanic culture, very close family friends become, a tia or a teo. I mean, they are their family. I grew up in Oklahoma, and my sister married a man who was a Creek Indian. And I promise you, every time we went out to dinner, if we went to the mall, anywhere we went with him, we ran into a relative, and he called them auntie and uncle so-and-so, and he'd introduce them. This is my, auntie so-and-so, this is my uncle so-and-so. And you're like, oh my gosh, I thought your dad only had one brother. And so there's this on your mother's side of the family. What is this? And this, you have one brother. Where are all these aunts and uncles coming from? Oh no, she just lived down the street from us for, 30 years when I was growing up. So she's an aunt. But, when his grandmother died and we all went to the funeral, I mean, that place was packed with relatives. And again, in Western culture, we might kind of go, I mean, there were 5 people who were blood related to this woman, and there were about 60 people who said they were relatives, and they got to define themselves. But those issues can happen in this as well. And many times we saw it in the hospital. And Susan, I know, since I know you all pick on you, I know that, working as a social worker in a healthcare setting, we would often see people, you might have a live-in girlfriend who had a closer relationship than the adult, the 30-year-old child. I still remember when I was at Northeast Baptist, we had a gentleman who his live-in girlfriend of 30 years, was actually not allowed to come see him in the ICU. We had to fight to allow her to come and see him in the ICU because she was technically not a relative. And we were like, oh my God, lie and say you're the common law wife, just even though you don't say you are. But when decisions ultimately had to be made, she legally could not make those decisions. And we had to go to an 18-and-a-half-year-old child who was not prepared, who didn't have a close relationship with his father. And that was really very difficult. And we had to help him navigate that, help this de facto wife navigate the fact that she wasn't getting to make decisions about the end of life for a gentleman, that she didn't want to consider him her husband. I was like, oh, I kept thinking, just lie, please, just lie.
Better
and
yet,
all of those, I think, Margaret,
how about
it seems like you might be a nun. You might be sending me to purgatory already for telling people to lie, but I don't. Susan, I'm sorry, did you have something?
Better yet, how about the a person has a legal spouse that's been living with his girlfriend for 30 years and you have to call security because they start having a cat fight.
Yes. Well, actually, I should have said this gentleman had a legal wife. That was one reason why she couldn't be his common law wife. He did still have a legal wife who said, I want nothing to do with this. So that's why we had to go to an 18-and-a-half-year-old son because the legal wife was like, I'm out. I've been out for 30 years. Don't call me. So, but yes, but we didn't have the cat fight from that. So, I think we have to understand that family can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. And so, sometimes, we want to, and I'll tell you, me personally, I want to close my mind and say, I don't understand why this neighbor is getting so bent out of shape. They're just a neighbor. Well, maybe they're not just a neighbor. Let's broaden our role. And so, why do people get funky? We talked a little bit about they revert back to these roles that they were kind of put in, that society puts expectations on them to act in certain ways. And when there's conflict in them being able to perform those roles, or they weren't really fully formed when they happened, we can get those fights. But we can certainly get them, as we talk about grief and guilt, people thinking, oh my gosh, I should have had a closer relationship. I wish I'd done more. The last thing I said to my father before he slipped into a coma was not kind. So those feelings of guilt can certainly come into the way we interact then with each other. I made some notes on role reversal. I'm actually quoted in a book that's called Parenting Your Parents, and I didn't know the name of the title. I love the book. I hate the title. You cannot parent your parents. You can't. I don't like this role reversal idea that when your parents somehow become older, you now have to take on the parental role. And again,
what you do, I just seeing that dynamic,
No.
the mom now becomes the very passive one, and the daughter or the son are telling them what we're going to do now and where we're going to go. And
so correct. And that's why I say we use, so I have become a caregiver to that person. But that doesn't mean you're a parent, because a parent is a very specific set of roles. And I understand where the term comes from. I get the meaning behind it. I think it's very disrespectful. I also kind of have a biblical worldview of honor thy mother and father, and so we cannot be the parent of them. And parenting typically means raising someone to become independent, and we're actually, many times in this, we're helping somebody to become more dependent. So, as a parent, I did not keep my 1-year-old in diapers as long as possible. Right? I tried to get her out of them. And then the same thing, I know we talk about those roles, and you say, somebody kind of, the parent often becomes now the passive one and looking for support. Absolutely. And we need to honor that, and we need to help in that relationship. But if you'd ever met, my older sister, she was never passive as a child. So, saying that that's a normal role of a parent having a passive child, it's not always true, right? There are very headstrong children out there. I was passive, still am. So, but yes, so I don't love the term parenting or parents, but in that same respect, sometimes pieces of those roles reverse. So some of the hands-on caregiving, the things that we're having to do, decisions that have to be made, those are roles that a parent might and often do perform for a child. So we need to be respectful of those. I just don't like the term parenting your parent. But sometimes when those roles reverse, that's what creates problems many times in adult children, is that why are you bossing mom around? My sister still, I'm going to keep going back to my sister. I can't believe I've been in social work for 35 years. I'm going to keep using my own family as an example, but because we're probably the most dysfunctional family that I know. So my older sister, whom I love dearly, treats my mother like a 3-year-old. And my mother is an 84-year-old brilliant woman with a world of history and no cognitive deficits, nothing. So there's no reason for her to treat her, but she will just, mother, do you need to do that? Mom, don't forget to tell your doctor. I'm going to write it down. I'll go with you. And she just becomes very dictatorial. And so my mother said that we were actually in London. My mother said something about, my sister said something about, or my mother said something about, don't treat me like a 6-year-old. And I agreed with her. I was like, yeah, I mean, if you'd stop acting like she's a child, treat her like your mother. Well, now my sister, if you hadn't planted it in mom's mind that I treat her like a kid, and I'm like, oh. So that's one of our lovely fights sometimes, is that it's my fault that my sister treats my mother like a child. So, lots of things can come in, but typically the most problems come from poor communication. And that's because we revert back to these, communication styles that we had as children, even as adults. And so we don't communicate well. And so, the other piece, I love this, kick the dog, I call it kick the dog syndrome. And I remember learning about it when we were in grad school and when I was in graduate school 1,000 years ago. And that's not what it was called, but it's basically stating that, we can afford to take out our frustrations on the people closest to us. So, right, if I'm a traditional businessman at the office all day, and I really get frustrated with my boss is just ticking me off, can I yell at my boss? Can I tell him to go stick it, where the sun doesn't shine? Can I tell him? I can't tell him off, right? I get fired. So I come home and I kick the dog. Well, the dog didn't do anything to me, or in many cases, I yell at my wife, or God forbid, kick my wife, all right? And that's where many times we take out our frustrations. So when we have frustrations and those guilty feelings and those anxious feelings and, mom or dad, is near death. They're at the end of their line. They're at, they're at ABODE. They're on hospice, and I'm feeling frustrated that I can't control any of this. That all of this is out of my control. And so the people I can yell at and who will still love me is my family, right? And so sometimes they won't still love me. I have cousins. Again, I'm going to stick with my family. I do have cousins who got into a fist fight at my grandmother's funeral in the parking lot. So I'm sorry, not at their mother's funeral. At their mother's funeral, they got into a fist fight in the parking lot.
About what?
We don't even know. Who knows? But one of them had, how dare you show up? You never were here for mom. Which is funny because neither of them were caregivers for her. Their sister was the caregiver, moved her into her house. The boys both lived in Cincinnati, and my female cousin and my aunt lived in Kentucky. So they would visit, but they were not hands-on caregivers. So, because it wasn't about that. That's what the fist fight, that's what the words were about. But the real fight was that they had all this animosity from one stole the other one's girlfriend 20 years ago, and he's never forgiven him. I mean, they've never gotten along. And they could hold it together. They held it together at my great aunt's funeral. They held it together at our grandmother's funeral, and then they lost it at their mother's funeral. They just couldn't. They couldn't hold it together. So that was the stressor that pushed them over the edge, the loss of their mother. So, everybody deals with stress. Everybody deals with their grief in a different way. Hopefully, most people not with their fists, but they do, but people do take things out. And so I always tell folks to take the high road. That this is whatever is going on with your loved one. It's not about you. It's about them. And so many times when you're dealing with a family or a family member that's not towing the line with everybody else, it's about the situation. And so you need to not take things personally, even though many times probably their interaction with you is very personal. They're calling you names, they're bringing up things that happened 40 years ago, they're right. But we have to remind ourselves, we can deal with this later, but what we need to deal with right now is mom. Mom is the sick one. Let's deal with this. And so, go ahead.
I just have a question about, so when you've got that one person, it's usually a daughter, unfortunately, that's doing all of the caregiving, and there gets to be resentment. And how do you get those other ones involved?
And that's a tricky one. And so once again, clear communication. What we typically find is that there has not been clear communication. There is, and you're right, it's typically the daughter. I thought you were going to say it's typically the daughter who causes trouble. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's always the brother. It's always the brother. It's not, but it's often, right? It's often the sister. It's the daughter that's providing the care, or at least one daughter, and then all the other siblings are useless and worthless, and they're not doing anything, and I can't get them to do a darn thing. So, when we talk with folks, I try to pull out of them, name one thing that your sister has done for your mother to help your mother or help you. I need you to name one thing. Goodness, sorry, my wife is yelling. And so I think it's a bug. So she's not yelling in anger. So I keep hearing, get it off me, get it off me. So sorry, it's just hilarious. Unless you're her, and then it's horrifying. But so, I try to say, I need to try to find one thing that they're doing, because typically they're doing nothing. It's they're not doing what I want them to do, or they're not doing enough. But along that same line, many times they aren't doing much. They're like, well, Cindy's doing everything. I don't need to do much. Or they're handling their grief by stepping back. often, sometimes it's just because they live out of town, live out of state, but many times even in town, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And the one daughter has kind of taken on. And when you talk to the non-productive siblings and ask them, they'll often say, well, Cindy's doing it all. Why do I don't need to do anything. I offered some help in the beginning and she said she had it handled. So now I stopped. So if we clearly communicate, here's what I need.
Do you think it's important or good for, like for me, I'm the hospice nurse, when I'm seeing that dynamic and I'm seeing the daughter burned out, for me to call those siblings and say, where are you? We need you. Is that okay?
I think it's fine. I think it's okay.
Mhm.
I think the problem is that sometimes we get triangulated into these family issues. And so daughter Cindy is saying, my brother Gus does nothing. He does nothing. And so, day in and day out as the hospice nurse, you're seeing Cindy and you're seeing all of the hard work that she's putting in. So you want to believe her. But what happens is then you become part of Team Cindy and you become part of, anti-team Gus. You're rooting against him. So you do need to be very careful that if you're going to contact him, and I do think it's appropriate that you get Cindy's permission, that you say, I would love to call your brother, and that you clear your mind and clear your judgment as much as possible. We can't get rid of it all the time, but come into it with, hey, I'm the hospice nurse and I'm in there and I'm working with Cindy and I'm just kind of wondering, I hadn't met you yet. So I'm just kind of wondering, how are you involved? And so give him or her that opportunity to give their side of the story, if you will. And that's where I'm saying so many times I'm hearing they do nothing, they do nothing, they do nothing. I call the brother, just curious, I hadn't met you yet. I've been working with your mom for 7.5 years and you've never shown up. No, so, but I haven't met you yet. And they're saying, oh my gosh, I pay for all of her care. And I live out of state, but I call her 3 times a week. And you're like, oh, okay, none of that was explained. And it may not be enough. It may not be what I think my brother should do. It's certainly not enough that's what Cindy thinks her brother should do. But we usually find out there is something, there is a connection. Now, we do find out in more cases than you would want that they really are doing nothing. And sometimes it's because, Cindy and I don't get along, so we just fight, so I just stay away. I'm mad at my mother, so I don't come around. She doesn't want anything to do with me. Sometimes there's a sob story. I wish I could come around. But more often than not, there is something. So when the one sibling who feels like they're doing the most, and that is often what happens. You have that one child, usually a daughter. Every once in a while, it's the daughter-in-law, right? It's the oldest son's daughter. And so, but it's usually a female, and they're building up resentment. And so to get them to understand, what is it that you need or want? Let's verbalize that. Let's communicate that very clearly, using I statements. I feel overwhelmed. I feel not, you never do anything. You are useless. You don't, you must not love mom. Let's not point fingers. It needs to come back. I feel overwhelmed. I, feel like I'm doing all of the work. And then see if we can't help them. And I think this is where that phone call, where you can help them communicate, be that bridge, either as the hospice nurse or certainly your hospice social workers, your hospice chaplains. I think any of those folks would be uniquely gifted in being able to help build those bridges, as long as they can keep a clear mind and not judge, not try and pick one team over the other, because we all want to do it, right? You go back to the office and I'm on Team Cindy. That brother's a jerk. But in the thick of it, helping to find things that he can do that would help. And that may be just making phone calls, forwarding the bills to him so that he can coordinate, even if he's not paying, even if he doesn't have the money, but find something in their skill set, because everybody has a skill set. And some people just, we would find people who are like, I didn't visit my father in the hospital because hospitals make me physically sick. I just couldn't come see him. Oh, okay. So what could you do? You could, send donuts with your sister who's sitting up all night with him. You can, you can order some food. You can make video phone calls. So you can help make the doctor's appointments. My wife's mother has dementia and lives in Northern California. She has pretty advanced Alzheimer's. And my father-in-law is still in the house. He works, in his 70s. He still works full time. He is not a caregiver. He's not going to wipe anybody's butt. He's a retired colonel. He's not going to do that. And we've had the powwow of what's his skill set. I'm going to keep working. I'm going to do the dish. He's taken over a lot of the kitchen duty. He does the dishes. He cooks quite often. But his main focus is, I'm going to pay for the care that she does need. I'm paying for the caregivers in the house. My wife's sister lives just next door, so she comes over all the time, and she really kind of coordinates the care. But she's running 2 nonprofit organizations, and so her brain is just on overload. And so they worked out that my wife's sister goes to the doctor's appointments with her mother. My wife, in 2019, my wife went 7 times before COVID. She's been 3 times now since vaccinated. So she tries to go for 10 to 14 days at a time. But in between those times, she is my sister-in-law's brain. She's her sister's brain. So her sister calls her and says, oh my gosh, we're going to see the doctor next week. And I just remembered, I don't think her hearing aids are working well. And my wife puts it on a note, and my wife keeps a running list of the things that my sister-in-law wants to talk to the doctor about. And then when it's time for the doctor's appointment, she sends her an organized list that she has created to say, here's the things you wanted to talk about. And so my sister-in-law doesn't have to stop during her day. She can literally text her, remind me, mom's got a sinus drip. Her sinuses are acting up. So find a strength that person has and play off of it, and build a team. Come at it as a team approach, and find those people's strengths. So, and there's lots of ways you can communicate, of course, with technology today. I mean, obviously, we can text, we can email, but there are lots of online, Caring Village, that helps you create a calendar that everybody can share. And you can have the brother responsible for dinner every Monday night. He can live in Switzerland, and he can send dinner. He can have a pizza delivered on Monday night, right? Every Monday night. Lots of Helping Hands is another website where you can kind of build that community. So caringvillage.com, lots of Helping Hands. I think those are the 2 that we like the best, but you can actually keep track of mom's appointments. You can keep track of her medications. You can send notes back and forth to the team. Some of those, I think lots of Helping Hands let you create the financial team and a caregiving team. There are ways to do it with technology. Some people don't like technology, so pick up the phone and ask for help. And that's, I think, Beverly, to your point, that's where we say, when was the last time you asked your brother for something? And some people are just waiting to be asked. Most people want a leader. And so if daughter Cindy is willing to take on the role as the leader, then let her. But a leader also delegates. And so many times we take on the leader, but we also take on all of the duties and the stress. And that's a horrible way to run a business. Not that helping somebody die with dignity is a business, but it is. And so we need to be able to, if we're going to lead this team, we need to make sure that everybody agrees that I'm leading it. Because sometimes, right, we get those families that are like, I'm in charge. No, I'm in charge. And we get fist fights in the parking lot. But
I saw that one person and I've got like 2 of them now, and they take a lot of my time. I can't deal with the patient because I'm dealing with them, and they're the daughter that's taking care of everything, and they've almost alienated themselves from the other siblings.
Yep.
And the other siblings don't want to come around because that one just bites at them.
Yep.
You do nothing, you're useless, you're stupid. So they're like, fine. But the one who suffers is the mom. My patient,
Correct.
she cried.
And this is where I say counseling really helps, and getting those, and I'm not going to fix the family problems. Brother and sister may never hug each other. That's not what I'm going for. I'm going for you guys being able to be in the same room, or at least pass each other in the hall of the nursing home without screaming at each other. And so that means we're going to have to communicate. And so there are times when you can say, we're never going to work this out. I'm never going to like you. I'm never going to respect you. I don't like the way you treat mom. I don't want this. I hate you. And so there are times when we have to just say that it may never change, that we may never make it better. But I think if we can at least say, then how are we going to manage it? So we use one of those calendars and we say, brother visits on odd days and sister visits on even days, or, mornings and afternoons, or, and we make sure you never pass each other in the hall because we don't want that fight. But it does take some guidance. And I have found that not all, most families can agree to work together with hiccups. We still get bumps in the road, but they will agree to work together. But they have to agree to communicate, and they have to be given those skills. Sometimes they have to help be trained. How can I talk to my brother without screaming at him? Because I don't like screaming at my brother, right? Yeah, Sandy, did you have something? I'm sorry.
What about the patient? We keep going back to the mother. So what if the mother never had a good relationship with the son, for example, his whole life? They never had a good relationship. So now the mother's, terminally ill, very ill. That relationship still isn't going to be healed, or it would be a miracle if it was healed. So there's resentment between the siblings. Maybe one sibling does have a loving relationship with the mother. The other sibling, they've been estranged for 50 years.
Yep.
Can you talk about that? Like when the patient has sabotaged relationships and now she's very vulnerable, she's very ill, but yet she severed those relationships many years ago.
Well, and I always come back, and thank you, back to the point of it is about the patient, right? In this case, we'll just say it's the mother, right? So it's about the mother. And if her relationship with that child was severed and there was no real relationship, I think we have to honor that. I think we can honor the fact that the child may need some help, more help in the end, right? So I think if the mother doesn't want a relationship with that child, we need to honor that. Now, that doesn't mean on the deathbed that we can't get that the child can't come visit, maybe with some strict supervision. I mean, literally having, a sheriff or an officer of the law present, and which we've done. We've had folks, on the deathbed, you get to come say your goodbyes, but then, but mom's not conscious anymore because she didn't really want to have anything to do with you. We're going to let you come say your goodbyes. This is for you, not for her. But yeah, I think honoring their relationship. Most of the time, what we find is that, the parents have a different relationship with each child, that they may have a strained relationship with one of the children and still need protection, possibly from exploitation, financial exploitation or otherwise. And so that's where a deep social history is really good. That's where, again, social workers, not to plug us too much, but we're awesome. A deep social history where we can find out some of those relationships. I'm a huge fan of genograms. I love the work of Monica McGoldrick and I can't think of the other, a guy. There was Monica McGoldrick and someone else did some groundbreaking work in how how a genogram, which is really just a visual picture. I'm very visual, but it's a visual picture of relationships, both familial and kind of outside of that family system, just kind of the bigger system. But making sure that we understand what those are. And unfortunately, many times in our, I was going to say healthcare system, our disease care system, because we don't really have a healthcare system, we have a disease care system. We wait until the disease is far enough along that it's hard to get that social history. You know, mom is so demented, and so we're getting Cindy's version. Oh, let me tell you about my brother. He's useless. But you know, if we got to talk to mom, she'd say, no, I love him. He's different, but I love it. You know, so it's nice to get those earlier on, but it's not always possible. I don't know if I helped. I think I felt like I danced around that a little bit, but
Well, we just see it all the time in the hospital. If that parent had, you know, had her own very difficult personality, estranged a lot of people, there's not going to be this loving,
nope.
caring family that steps up. And I'm sure Susan remembers at St. Luke's, like lots of families, lots of patients were lonely, alone, very difficult to get family support because they burned bridges years before all of this happened, and no one's gonna just forgive and forget.
I'll share a story, and I use this so many times in my teaching and working and stuff. Many years ago, I had a client at Jewish Family Service, and I went to visit the lady, and she had a caregiver, and the daughter walked in kind of in a rush, and she had groceries and this and that, and she kind of threw the things to her mom, and then she turned to me and she says, look, my mother was an alcoholic. She treated us children terribly. She never gave us the love that we should have received. I will do anything as far as getting my mother's groceries, to getting her medicine and all of that. But please, please don't judge me and expect me to love my mother. And that has always stuck with me because I would hear so many staff and say, well, you know, where's the son? Where's the daughter? And I would always say, well, you don't know what kind of a parent that person was.
Exactly.
Can't judge because we don't know the whole story.
Great example. And what great insight from that daughter, by the way, to understand that, look, I'm willing to do what I have to do out of obligation, which truthfully, she didn't even have to do that, right? But to say, I'm not capable of giving her anything more emotional. And I think sometimes we have to be able to recognize that most children can't say that. They're going to show it, but they won't be able to verbalize. They don't even know why they hate their mother. So yeah,
And that takes
good
me back
point.
to,
Be some beautiful stories of healing too.
Yeah.
yeah. You know,
So
I had one
I hope we see that
kind of
the
like
end of
Susan's,
life.
example. I had a family who the daughter said, you know, mom was a terrible mom. She was mean. You know, there was just no love. She goes, I was never told I love you. Mom never said I love you. And she was just, you know, when the kids were old enough, they were all gone. Well, now she's dying. And she became the sweetest, most loving, tender person. And that's the person I met. And the daughters were just like, they didn't know what to do with her. They're just like, that's not my mother. And, you know, and just try to explain to them, you know, well, this is your loving mom. You never met her, but she came to say goodbye, you know? And,
Yeah.
and so, you know, they were still a little hesitant, but they, you know, they finally accepted her. But yeah, on her deathbed, she became loving and kind and sweet. I mean, she would grab their hands and just kiss their hands and say, I love you. And they would just like, who is this woman? Yeah.
Well, and what a beautiful way to frame that, Beverly, to say, you know, this is the loving mom who came to say goodbye to you.
Yeah. Did
that's
she ever
lovely.
say, I'm sorry? I think families want to hear
she
that.
was aware. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you're not going to get the sorry. Well, I don't have, I think that kind of covers everything I had to talk about, making sure that, when families disagree, that we're there, or if it's your family, your own family, that, we certainly use those I statements, that we reflect that it's not about me, it's about it's about the person who's dying. And then as professionals, that we make sure that we don't get sucked into these
Vortex.
and the family dynamics, because it's really easy. And I don't, we all go back to the office and we talk among us, we talk about some of our families. The good daughter did this and the evil daughter did this, which, we can't say that to their faces, but we just, in the confines of our office, we'll say those things, but making sure that they still can work together in whatever capacity that may look like. And I almost played a clip, but I love, if you want to watch a dysfunctional family take care of somebody, and you haven't seen enough of it in your own life, a movie called The Savages, and it's from the 1990s, I think. And it's Laura Linney and Philip Seymour Hoffman, are brother and sister, and they don't have a ton to do with their father. And their father's an actor whose name you'd recognize also, but I can't think of it. And his 35-year live-in girlfriend dies. Well, everything was in her name. They were never married. And so they have to come pick up dad out of Nevada and move him back to the East Coast and take care of him. And because his live-in girlfriend was kind of his active brain, and nobody knew he had dementia. So anyway, so it's just, these siblings that are semi, separate lives, how they get pulled back together, and there's healing. It has a good ending. It has a beautiful ending. So I hate things with no redemption. But to just see some of the headaches, and certainly as professionals, we'll see lots of things in that movie of just, oh my gosh, that happened to me. One of my favorite scenes is when she confronts the nurse at the nursing home, and says, I don't know, it's my first day back. And which just drives me crazy when a nurse, I just started my shift. Well, that's what report was for. You should know what's going on. So I hate that excuse.
I haven't been here.
Yeah, I haven't. It's my first day back after a long weekend. Well, so
Yeah. Oh,
anyway.
gosh. Well, thank you. Thank you. And oh my goodness, the family dynamic is so huge in what we do, and in our own lives.
Yes.
And we're all going to deal with it, right?
Amen. We are.
I think.
Yeah, it was just occurring to me that, the family dynamic, I mean, another phrase might be the family dance. There's all of these interchanges that are happening, all these steps that have to be accomplished, and, learning to do new things too,
Yeah. And there's always someone stepping on someone's feet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Someone leading.
Someone always gets hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all fun and games till someone gets hurt. But yeah, so thank you. And this will wrap up the fourth session of ABODE Academy 3. Next week, we'll meet at the same place, same time. And let's see, volunteers. If you're still interested in becoming a volunteer, if you know someone that wants to be a volunteer, we're going to have volunteer training later this month, the 20th and 21st. And we'd love to have you. So just you know, call ABODE, email Mary, email me, and we'd love to see you. 'Cause, the house is open and we've got guests. We have 3. Now the house is full. So we'd love to see you there. All right. So just remember to look for your survey tomorrow. Look for it in your email box and fill it out and let us know how tonight went. And again, what you would like to hear in future sessions. All right.
Thank you, Byron.
Thank you.
Guys,
Thanks very
thanks for
much.
putting up with me. You all
Take
see.
care.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.